Hi there, good evening everybody. This evening's session is due to start in approximately 5 minutes' time. Thank you. Hi there, everybody, and good evening, and welcome to it's our first session of the VIVA financial tuition course for February 2023. This evening's session, as I said, is our first session, and there will be subsequent sessions. However, the subsequent sessions following this evening's session will be for VIVA customers only. Tonight's session, rest assured, is a free session that we just put on to give you a bit of an introduction and a bit of a taster into what you can expect from VIVA Financial Tuition. Now, before we go any further, let me first of all just introduce myself. My name is Kelly Davison, and I am the operational case study tutor that is going to be here to support you on your journey through your operational case study course and ultimately the operational case study exam. At the end of tonight's session, you will all be sent an email. That email will include the content from this evening's session, and it will also include some information about different course options that might be something that you want to consider if you're wanting to continue with VIVA Financial Tuition. Now, as you all no doubt know, the operational case study exam is very, very different from the previous exams that you'll have done for CIMA. So this exam is absolutely not an objective test style exam in terms of multiple choice, drag and drop, and picking all that apply. This exam is very, very different because it is based around a case study. Now, I am hoping that you guys have taken the opportunity already to actually have a look at the pre-seen information that's actually available for this operational case study exam. Now, for those of you that haven't yet had the opportunity to have a look at that pre-seen information, please make the time to go to the CIMA website and download that pre-seen information, because you need to make sure that you absolutely immerse yourself in that case study, because questions in the exam are going to be based around that pre-seen information and exam day information that you actually get. So it's going to be really important that you do review that pre-seen information in a lot of detail. Now, this evening, we're not going to go through the pre-seen and deep dive into it, but if you were to join us for the rest of the course, that content, that information will be made available to you. So tonight then, what we're going to have a look at is we're going to have a look at the key elements of the pre-seen information. We're then going to move on, and I want to get you thinking about the key theories that you need to think about from F1, E1 and P1 in relation to your operational case study. I'm then going to give you a few pointers in terms of an action plan that you might want to adopt going forward for the operational case study. And then finally, at the end of the session, we will have an opportunity for a bit of a Q&A, question and answer session. So if you can just hold your questions until the end of the session, that would be absolutely fantastic. I have no problem, however, you putting those in the chat panel or popping them into the Q&A panel as we go through, but I will just review all of those at the end of the session. Okay, so please do make sure that you're thinking about things, thinking about those questions that you might want me to run through. Okay, so let's get started then, and let's think about the key pre-seen information. Now, as I said, this is very much high level, and you will have to take the opportunity to either use the VIVA resources to actually have a look at the deep dive into the pre-seen, or you will have to take the time yourselves to go through that pre-seen information in a lot of detail. And believe me, there's quite a lot of it. You know, I think it's somewhere in the region of about 27 pages of this pre-seen information. So what I'm going to try and do is just give you a bit of an overview of the sort of key areas to concentrate on from that pre-seen information. Okay, so let's think about the case study and, more importantly, the company overview. Now, the company that you're going to have to immerse yourself into over the next few weeks is a company called Fireworks. Now, Fireworks designs, manufactures and sells quite a big range actually of high quality outdoor grills. Now, Fireworks is based in a country, and the country is called Beeland. Now, in Beeland, what they use as their currency is B dollars. Now, This organisation is pretty well established because they were founded in 1984. And since that point in time, mainly year on year, they have experienced and enjoyed quite significant growth year on year since the point where they were founded. Now, the current aim, and I stress that point, the current aim is that the company wants to create grills that enhance the outdoor eating experience. Okay, and that's the key thing. So they're not just thinking about the grill itself, but they're thinking about the experience holistically in relation to outdoor grilling. Now, the other thing that is really high on the agenda of Fireworks currently is that they are aiming to become carbon neutral within 6 years. Now, that in itself is going to be really important, excuse me, and has an important role to play, because that is therefore going to influence the decisions that Fireworks takes in this next year to help them get to the point where they are carbon neutral in 6 years' time. So it's going to impact, if you think about it, on their decision-making process. So, for example, if they're looking to invest in capital, invest in property, plant and equipment, they're going to have to think about this carbon neutral target, if you like, when they're thinking about the different types of acquisitions that are undertaken. Now, the products that they're producing, as I mentioned, you've got quite a big range, actually. The first range being gas grills. Now, the gas grills come in 2 different forms. You've got the Firecracker, which is the premium product, and you've got the Crackerjack, which is the basic product. You've then got the charcoal grills. So you've got the premium product, which is the Spinner. You've got a mid-level, which is the Rocket, and you've got the Sparkler, which is the more basic of the models. Then we've got electric grills. Well, as it stands at the moment, we've just got the one electric grill, which is the Wheel, which is the premium product. And then on top of that, guys, they also sell accessories as well. So grilling tools, secondary grills, cooking gloves, aprons, and also things like charcoal as well. So as you can see, quite a big range, and that range will have different sort of production processes depending on the type of product that is produced. So that is something that you're going to have to possibly think about and take into consideration when you're thinking about the different types of production processes. You also need to think about as well, in terms of this product base, the areas that they might be thinking about expanding or moving into in terms of these products that they're currently producing. Now, in terms of the production process, there are currently 4 different production processes ultimately, or components in there. We've got the steel pressing and welding process. We've then got the enameling process, then assembly, and then we've got the packaging stage. So pretty standard in the scheme of things, in the sense that you've got the production processes at the beginning, we've then got bringing together the grills, we've then got packaging them up so that we can then send them on to our customers. Now, this is important for Fireworks. Production is done at a constant rate throughout the year. Now, that's quite unusual, particularly for this type of product, because as you can probably appreciate, there is an element of seasonality in relation to the units that they sell. And if you think about it, you know, we're looking at outdoor grilling in here. It's highly likely that outdoor grilling is going to be probably more relevant in the summer months rather than in the winter period. However, production is constant, so they do not take into account these peaks and troughs and this seasonality in the production process. Now, if you think about it, what that means is that inventory will build up in the colder months, and it will decrease in the warmer months. Okay, so that's how it currently stands at the minute. So there is an element of seasonality in here that we're going to have to think about, and also think about whether or not this, in fact, is the most efficient and effective way that fireworks can undertake their production. Now, one of the things to just be mindful of in here is that's part of this production process. There are a number of different types of materials that go into production, and the main types of materials are frit, steel, and separate components that they ultimately buy in. Now, again, why is that important? Well, you're going to have to make sure that you're looking at the pre-scene and thinking about, where did they get these products from? Where did they get these materials? Who are their suppliers? Is there any risk associated with those suppliers? So, for example, they might only have one supplier of a particular material. Is that quite risky for an organisation of this nature? You know, you've got to start thinking about the types of questions that you might get based on these areas. Now, sales and distribution, so following on from the production process, as I've already said, seasonality really does impact on the sales, and it's pretty significant, and you'll see when you look at the numbers. They actually sell these products currently from 3 different channels. First of all, they're sold through retailers in B-Land, and these are specialist retailers that they're currently using. 68% of their volume of their sales from 21-22 came from these retailers. Now, what you've got to think about in here is that these retailers are going to be taking a cut from the revenue that's generated from the sale of the grills. So actually, the B-Land retailers have got the shortest or the smallest margin for fireworks themselves. So this is squeezing the margins that they actually receive themselves, unlike using their own website. Because when they use their own website, which is 20% of the volume of the sales currently, they are not having to pay that middle person, if you like, that middle retailer or that third-party agent in this situation. So selling through their own website is going to mean that their margins for those particular sales are significantly higher than what they would be for the retailers and for the third-party agents in that situation. Now, look at the numbers there. Currently, 80% of our sales come through these third parties in some way, shape or form, and only 20% comes from our own website. So there is a real opportunity there, I feel, to ramp up the sales that we sell directly to our consumers. Now, just a point on the agents in here. Now, these third-party agents actually sell outside of B-Land. So they're actually selling grills to other locations, whereas as it currently stands, the B-Land retailers only sell in B-Land for obvious reasons. And in our own website, or from our own website, we only actually sell them domestically as well. So it's the third-party agents currently that are expanding the reach, is probably the best way of putting it, of fireworks in this situation. So again, that could be something that we consider optimizing. It could be that we start selling from our own website directly outside of B-Land so that we can maximize our margins. Yeah, just something to think about, I suppose, in relation to this. Now, with reference to sales and distribution then, well, fireworks have got their own fleet of vehicles, and they use these vehicles to transport the goods to the retailers, and also the agent warehouses in there as well. So they use their own vehicles for that. And again, guys, that goes back to what I was saying to you before about the fact that this might be an area that we need to think about expanding, investing in new vehicles. Don't forget, carbon neutral, we're going to have to think about whether we make a shift from petrol diesel vehicles to maybe electric vehicles, for example. Or we might need to think about, using appropriate software so that we can actually maximize the logistics and the capacity that we've got in these vehicles as well. Now, from a costing and budget perspective, not too complex, I think it is fair to say, for fireworks. They currently use just a normal standard costing system. Yeah, that's it. So it's not very scientific in that respect. Basically, with standard costing, what happens is you have got your standard cost cards. Those are set up for individual products. But the issue with standard costing is our overheads at the end of the day. And as it currently stands at the moment, fireworks actually absorb their overheads, either using machine hours or labour hours. Now, as you can probably imagine, for an organisation such as fireworks, their overheads are pretty big for this type of operation. And therefore, this might not be the most scientific approach to adopt. So it could be something along the lines of maybe shifting to things like activity-based costing, for example. So these are all things and all snippets that you need to think about in terms of what questions you might get on exam day, and thinking about, the pros and cons associated with using activity-based costing rather than total absorption costing could be a very typical exam question. Okay, so something to think about there in terms of how your overheads are absorbed and whether or not currently it's the most effective way of reviewing this. Now, in terms of budgets then, what are they thinking? Sales. Now, sales is essentially the principal budget factor for an organisation such as fireworks, because at the end of the day, that will drive absolutely everything else in terms of the budget setting process. And they anticipate that for next year and the year that you're dealing with, that there is going to be a 1.8% increase in sales volumes. We're not saying in sales revenue, we're saying in the volume of sales. Now, as it stands at the minute, budgets are only produced once a year. Okay, that's it. So they're just produced annually on an incremental basis. Now, an incremental basis, basically look at last year. What do we need to change? What do we need to uplift? What do we need to sort of downgrade in terms of the costs? I think possibly here, there is a real opportunity to start thinking about other types of budget setting processes. So, for example, rolling budgets, activity-based budgeting could be prime examples that could be used as an alternative. And again, you've got to start thinking about the pros and cons associated with those different types of budget setting processes. Now, just one final point on the budgets. As it stands at the moment, these budgets are imposed budgets. So we have very, very little involvement in here with the management in the organisation other than senior managers. So operational managers are not involved. So as I said, we've got a very much an imposed budget currently. Could be argued that there is a possibility in here that that budget setting process does change, become a little bit more involving of the operational managers. In that respect, then, what you might need to think about in here is what impact that could have on the operational managers themselves, the organisation as a whole, and the budget setting process. So you need to think about whether or not they should have imposed budgets or participative budget setting processes. And again, there are pros and cons associated with each of those, which again is something that I would definitely consider thinking about. Now, finances. Now, I do not expect you to, absorb everything that I go through this evening, particularly in relation to the numbers. But the whole idea here is just to give you a bit of an overview in terms of, what we found is happening with fireworks. That's probably the best way of putting it, really. And as I've mentioned, if you look at the or if you actually embark on a VIVA course, we've done a detailed analysis of all the finances and a big analytical review, ratio analysis, etc., that you'll be able to get your hands on. But this is just some food for thought, really, for you to take away this evening. Okay, so in 21-22, revenues grew by 5% and gross profit was $32.2 million dollars. Okay, and that was an increase of 3.8%. Okay, gross margins decreased. Okay, so decreased from 42.5% to 42.1%. Now, just because it has deteriorated slightly, I'm not saying that that is something to necessarily worry about, but there's obviously been some either reduction in selling price or increase in cost, direct cost that is, or a mixture of both. But it's not that significant, that 0.4% movement, particularly when we see that operating profits have gone up by 9.7% to $7.2 million dollars in there. Okay, so generally speaking, they are moving in the right direction in here. Might need to just consider what's happening with direct costs to some degree. So what do they do overall? They generate a profit. Okay, so it's definitely moving in the right direction, and a profit before tax of $6.9 million dollars, which is an increase of 9.4%. Now, the other thing that I found quite interesting when I was going through the pre-scene in here was the fact that the right of use assets that they've got has increased by 106.7%. That's pretty significant. So that means that this organisation, Fireworks Now, is obviously taking advantage of leasing in here. So you are going to have to think about, well, do I understand IFRS 16? If I don't, well, I need to for the actual exam. So we've got a big increase in right of use assets and a big increase in lease liabilities. So it looks like that's one of the ways that they are managing their cash at this point. So actually, rather than paying outright for property, plant and equipment or taking out loans, what they're doing is they're choosing to lease. So as I said, make sure that you are comfortable with IFRS 16. So what do the key ratios tell us? Well, GP margin, as we've just mentioned, has deteriorated slightly, not by much, just by 0.4 percentage points in here. So it is in a declining position, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily anything to really worry about in here. I suppose what you've got to think about is the sort of mix of products that they sell and the fact that they've got these different outlets, some of which are going to have bigger margins, some of which are going to have smaller margins. So we just need to maybe take that into consideration in here. Operating profit margin has moved in the right direction. So that tells me that we are controlling our indirect costs. Our admin, our distribution costs are being controlled a lot better than they were previously. But again, not that significant a movement in there. So it looks like they're quite solid in terms of what they're doing. Net profit margin then gone from 6.5% to 6.8%. So again, on that right trajectory, that increase in terms of that net profit margin. Cash flow conversion or cash conversion, again, this has declined a little bit. And again, in terms of the cash conversion, remember, this is looking at how long cash is tied up, from the initial point where we purchase our materials for production until the point that our customers actually pay us ultimately. It has declined. It's declined by 4 days. Again, not much to worry about as far as I'm concerned. And then we've got our gearing. And gearing, remember, gearing looks at how the business is financed in here. And we can see in here that there has been a slight improvement. Now, guys, what I always say regarding ratios is that they're wonderful, you know, to be able to compare and contrast year on year or compare to competitors or an industry average. But please do make sure that when you're looking at the pre-seen, that you're going beyond these ratios as well. That's important. So you need to think about why. Okay, why has this situation come to fruition? You know, why are we in a position where our gearing has improved? Why are we in a position where our GP percentage, our gross profit margin, has deteriorated? And the answers will be there for you in that pre-seen. Okay, so make sure that you're not just looking at these on face value, you're deep diving in and saying, why has it happened and what is the reasoning behind it? Okay, now there's a couple of other pointers then, bits and pieces that I want you to think about. So it states in the pre-seen that Beeland or the Beeland grill market is expected to grow by 5% year on year over the next 5 years. What you will see if you look at the pre-seen in any detail is that Fireworks are anticipating that same level of growth. Yeah, so they are anticipating a 5% increase in their revenue. The other thing to just note and getting an idea of what's going on in the industry, new types of grills are being developed by competitors. We need to stay relevant. Yeah, we need to be agile as an organisation. And when I say we, I mean Fireworks. They need to be able to adapt to these changes in the actual industry. So the things that you need to think about are camping grills, not something that we currently do, but there is an article in your pre-seen material that talks about camping grills and advances in that industry. They also talk about an article which looks at grills controlled by your iPhones or your Android phones. And that's an interesting thing in terms of technology and how we can think about digital costing in relation to those areas. Easier clean grills is also something that's quite exciting in that particular industry. So companies in the grill industry have differentiated. They have differentiated not by just offering grills and accessories, but one of their major competitors is now offering cookery classes. Now, again, what you've got to think is that something that Fireworks might possibly embark on doing? And if they do, how are they going to cost that? How are they going to budget that? You know, what experience have they got? Well, the experience that they've got is their new chief exec is actually an ex-chef. So there is a lot of experience there. However, how we actually manage that, how we actually monitor that, how we budget for that is going to be very, very different from the production that is currently taking place. So let's think about a couple of potential scenarios. And again, these are just what we've come up with. So just bear that in mind. This list is by no means exhaustive, just gives you a few ideas. So new products, a new smart grill may be developed. So that could be in relation to a smartphone app for controlling the grill, as I've just previously mentioned. Expansion. They could look at selling new grills in a different country rather than using the agents that they've currently got. Improvements. I've already mentioned about property, plant and equipment. You know, they've got this goal about sustainability, remember, so that could be something that's on the agenda. And they may also seek to change the way that they budget and the way that they cost their different products. That change in budget and change in costing would be particularly relevant if we were moving into a realm of new products or differentiating, as we've just said, in relation to things like cookery classes, because we would have to budget those a little bit differently. And then finally, performance. It's highly likely in some way, shape or form in the exam that you are going to be asked to comment on the key performance indicators of the organisation. It is also highly likely, no getting away from it, unfortunately, that you are going to have to comment on variances, you know, your labour, materials, overhead variances, etc. And you might have to also give some insight into a quality dashboard, you know, how they monitor quality. Because remember, it's not just all about the numbers anymore. We've got to look beyond that, haven't we? We've got to have this sort of balanced scorecard approach. So something to definitely be mindful of. Okay, so that's sort of a bit of an introduction, very high level on the pre-scene. You've got to get your hands on that pre-scene information and use that in conjunction to what I've gone through if you haven't had the opportunity to do that already. We've then got the key theories, P1. Now, I'm not sure whether you're aware of this, but P1 is heavily tested in the operational case study paper, and essentially that's the driver for this exam, is what I would say. In terms of the key theories, then, these are the ones that I absolutely 100% feel that you should be focusing on. Different types of costing methods. I've talked about total absorption costing versus activity-based costing would be a prime example. You've also got digital costing, a real hot topic, guys, digital costing. You need to make sure that you are comfortable with digital cost units and how digital costing is very different from the other costing methods that we look at. There's some really good articles out there in relation to digital costing. You need to consider risk and uncertainty. So think about the tools that we can use for this. Things like payoff tables, decision trees, using things like sensitivity analysis might be prime examples in here. So risk and uncertainty, particularly because we're going to be in a position where different types of decisions are going to have to be made. No getting away from it. Variance analysis. We see it almost in every single exam. Okay, so make sure that you're absolutely hot on variance analysis. Budgeting behaviours, I've talked there about imposed budgets or participative budgeting, but also think about the different types of budgets as well. So thinking about rolling budgets, activity-based budgets, comparing and contrasting those and seeing which would be most beneficial for an organisation such as fireworks. This is a scary one for most people, but linear programming, gosh, we see it a lot, linear programming, in terms of interpreting a linear programming chart, for example. So looking there at where you've got multiple limiting factors. Okay, so do make sure that you're comfortable with that. And then finally, what if analysis. What if analysis very closely linked really to risk and uncertainty in there. Thinking about how you could use what if analysis rather than using things like expected value analysis and that type of thing. F1 then, F1 is going to be very much more about understanding the standards, but also applying those standards. Remember, this exam is not learn and churn, is the way that I put it. This exam is about applying what you know to the scenario. And that's where this exam is very, very different from what you've seen before. So it's about the application. It's about looking at a scenario and then saying, right, how am I going to apply IS 16, for example? So that's where this exam is a bit different. Now, yes, standards are important, and I'm just going to run through the key ones really. I just want to stress, we don't know anything more than you do, other than having the experience of these exams. So just be aware of the fact that these are the ones that we think are hot topics. IFRS 16. Leases. There's been a mention of right of use assets in this exam, in the pre-scene. So make sure that you are hot with leases. that links very nicely with IAS 16. So know how to deal with an acquisition, know how to deal with the disposal, know how to deal with depreciation. The best way I can say with any of these standards, and the best way to approach it, is to say to yourself, right, what's the initial recognition and what's the subsequent accounting treatment? And if you can nail that, then you've got these standards in the bag. Yeah. So initial recognition, how do we apply the standard? And what then is the subsequent treatment thereafter? What do we have to do with that standard following the initial recognition criteria? So IFRS 16 leases, IAS 16, you're looking at property, plant and equipment, tangible non-current assets. IAS 10 rears its head every now and again, and this is events after the reporting date. So this is looking at adjusting and non-adjusting events and the rules associated with that. So again, make sure that you're comfortable with it. There's no getting away from IAS 2, and you've seen that quite a few times now in your studies. Inventory. Yeah, so managing inventory, valuing inventory, you know, what implications will that have in the way that we recognise the inventory in our financial statements? The other thing to note as well, and this is why I think it's so important for this one, remember what I said to you before about the fact that production is constant. Yeah, it's constant. Remember, you could possibly have issues then for inventory that could well go out of date. It could become obsolete in this situation. So yeah, I'm thinking IAS 2 might be pretty relevant for this exam. IFRS 5, this standard is the standard which relates to discontinued operations, essentially, and also assets held for sale. Now, I don't think we need to think about the discontinued operations side of things, because obviously at this stage in your studies, you're not dealing with groups, but you definitely need to think about whether or not you've got an asset held for sale at the end of the accounting period. That's the angle that I would go down with IFRS 5. Now, that's just one side of the story with F1. Remember, this is where your working capital comes in as well. So you've got to be hot on your working capital ratios. Think about it. That will be your debtors days, or should I say receivables days, payables days, inventory days, the working capital cycle in here. How long is cash tied up in that cycle? You've got to be hot on inventory management, you know, the different ways that inventory can be managed. First in, first out, AVCO method. You might also need to think about things like economic order quantity in relation to your inventory management as well. So just think about the theory associated with that. And then ultimately, all of this is about managing cash. We know cash is king. Yeah, an organisation can be profitable, but they can still fail. And they can still fail when they don't have cash. So cash management and looking after that particular function is absolutely key for an organisation such as Fireworks. They run out of cash, they can't continue. Interestingly, when it comes to dealing with the cash element in here, one thing to note is that they've already started making changes because they are leasing assets now, which is going to be useful actually in terms of managing their cash position. And then finally with your theories, E1, the most common E1 related questions that we tend to get are in relation to KPIs, you know, your key performance indicators. And quite often what you're asked to do is you're asked to suggest key performance indicators. You've got to put forward your ideas. So typically a question will ask for a set of KPIs. They will ask you how they're calculated. So you're going to have to say, and they will ask you about the reason why it would be appropriate to have that as a key performance indicator for the particular scenario that you're faced with. Now, for these types of questions in the exam, you must always try and make the key performance indicators specific for the scenario, not just general. It's absolutely imperative that you have to make sure that you provide information about how these KPIs would be calculated. And that's where a lot of students fall down. That is a common student pitfall that I just want you to be aware of. Now, in terms of this, I just want to stress at this point that you probably won't have to calculate the KPIs. You probably won't have sufficient information to do that, but you'll be able to tell the examiner how you're doing it and why you're doing it and why it's appropriate. And that's what this is testing. It's not testing that you know how to do sort of standard KPIs. Absolutely not. It's testing that you understand the scenario, you can put that particular hat on, and then you can actually suggest different types of key performance indicators. Okay, so action plan then. What you need to pass in here. And, you know, it takes a lot of hard work, guys, obviously. So over the next few weeks, you're obviously going to have to put the time in and the effort in. But in order to pass this exam, you're going to need the following: an understanding of the exam, the mechanics of it. And that's what I will be covering on the Elite course on Workshop 1, getting under the bonnet of the exam. What is it all about? What are they actually looking for? How do you get that pass in terms of this particular exam? Because it's very, very different. So you need to have a key understanding of the mechanics. You have to have excellent knowledge of the syllabus, yeah, for F1, E1 and P1. Anything is fair game. You know, what I went through with you before, that was the key syllabus areas. It doesn't mean that others won't come up, yeah? Those are the ones you have to make sure that you're absolutely on top of. So you need to make sure that you've got this excellent knowledge in there. And just on that point, I appreciate that some of you might have had exemptions from some of those papers. Unfortunately, you're exempt from the paper, you're not exempt from the knowledge. So that knowledge will be in there somewhere from other qualifications and experiences that you've had. You will need to do a lot of work on exam technique. Getting into the mind of the examiner is absolutely, absolutely key. You really need to focus on how to answer a question, how to get those marks in there. That's going to be absolutely key. And again, all of which we do support you with on each of the courses. The pre-scene. But in the exam, you actually have access to the pre-scene. It is there for you to be able to log into and have a look at. That's absolutely fine. You don't have time. If I'm brutally honest with you, you know, this exam is quite a time-pressured exam. So you need to know that pre-scene inside out, guys. You absolutely do. And you need to therefore do a line-by-line analysis, which we've done on your behalf in the VIVA programme. Time management, absolutely key. This exam is very time-pressured and you will not have time to sit back and relax and think about, right, how am I going to approach this question? You need a plan of action, and you'll need that plan of action before you get into the exam. You have 4 questions to do in this exam, and each of those 4 questions will have supplementary elements, and those 4 questions are only worth 45 minutes each. That's it. And once you've actually finished a question, you can't go back. Absolutely not. 45, 45, 45, 45. That's how it works. So you've got to be very, very clear on how long you're spending on a particular area so that you can make sure that you answer every part of the question. And then finally, I think the last thing to mention is commitment. You know, you've got a few weeks now until this exam. You've got to make time for your revision and also question practice. Now, This is the difference, because we get it, we get the fact that every single student, every single learner has got their own circumstances. And that in itself is obviously going to determine the action plan. But there is a general rule. Okay, first things first, book your exam. It sounds so obvious, and I'm hoping that most of you have done this already. But once it's done, you can then become a bit more familiar with how the exam is structured and the approach to adopt. Secondly, you have to then absolutely immerse yourself in that pre-seen document. That gives you the clues, as we've alluded to today, for the types of questions that you're going to get in the exam. Each week, you need to make sure that you are revising, recapping on the key theory for P1, E1 and F1. Keep that momentum going. And then, and this is where I cannot stress enough how important this is, you must attempt mock exams and past paper practice. You will not pass this exam if you do not practice mock exams and past papers. Fact. You have to commit to attempting that. Why? Because it's so different from everything that you've done before. You have to make sure that you're getting into the mind of the examiner and understanding what they want and answering the question set. That's key. So practice, practice, practice is absolutely what we recommend. Everybody's going to be a bit different. So you need to identify your weaknesses and brush up on those areas. All of you will have different areas that you need some additional support on. And then finally, constantly revise key theory, looking at the pre-seen in there, and test your knowledge regularly. And it goes full circle, guys, because that goes back to what I was saying before. You've got to do those mock exams. You've got to do those past papers. You've got to do that question practice, because it's about the application. And that's absolutely key for any of your case study exams. As we said, practice makes perfect. So key to passing this then is exam practice. Do not be afraid of making mistakes. That's what mocks are for. Mocks will highlight to you any areas which might be a bit of a weakness. So you can go back and you can revisit it, go back to the question again, and absolutely, absolutely do well on that question. Now, the important part of making mistakes is to learn from it. And that's what you're going to do by practice questions, mock exams, etc. So in closing, the operational case study exam is a passable exam. If you practice and prepare in advance, then you are going to enjoy the exam on exam day. If you feel ready, consider drafting a study plan, book the exam in. Start by revising the operational syllabi for F1, P1 and E1 in line with the pre-seen documentation and what I've gone through with you this evening as well. You've got to practice these questions. You've got to do mock exams. You've got to build that into your study program, because otherwise you're not going to be successful, unfortunately. And take time to reflect. Take time to reflect on your performance in your mock exams and learn from it. Analyze where you think you could improve. Finally, just want to say good luck. This is an exam that I'm quite passionate about, as you can probably tell from this evening's session. And it is the first time for your CIMA studies that you've seen an exam of this nature. The tools that you learn and the skills that you'll learn at the operational case study level will support you through your managerial case study and then finally your strategic case study. So make those changes now and develop those skills now, and it's really going to help you in your future studies as well. Okay then, guys, so after today's session then, as I've mentioned, this is a sort of free session to give you a bit of an insight into the programme. After today's session, you will be dropped an email, which will have lots of information in there following what we've gone through this evening with the slides, and also the recording from this evening's session. And you will also have lots of details in relation to the different sort of programs and options that you've got available, and also snippets of valuable information. Okay, thank you guys for your attentiveness this evening. And we're now just going to go through a few Q&As in that respect. I'm just going to have a look at what questions I've already got up there, but please do just pop them in there. Okay, so there's just a question there in terms of the session there. That's quite a specific one, that one, so I'll deal with that myself. Sorry, guys. That was from Elise. Teresa. Yeah, Teresa, not a problem. As I said, the recordings, etc., will be sent through. Lovely. RG, so considering which package, does the All Access Pass include operational case study standard light pack or operational case study complete course pack for all units? And how much is the extra mock for marking? RG, anything regarding the actual course structure and the course costs and everything, you'll get all of that sent across to you this evening, RG, because there are some discounts actually at this point. So honestly, do not worry about the price and things. All of that will be very, very clear in the documentation. Point 3 is interesting though, RG. Is the mock exam by VIVA just Word docs, or is it exam style software? It's exam style software, yeah. So it's exam style software which replicates the real exam. So rest assured you'll have a lot of practice on that. So thank you for that, RG. Eunice, you'd also like a copy of the recording. Yeah, everybody should get that at the end of today. Drew, good question. What was the pass rates for November? We don't know yet, Drew. They come out tomorrow, the pass rates. So all the pass rates do come out tomorrow. So all of the students, it might even be at 12 midnight this evening that students actually get their results. So Drew, I'll keep you posted on that as soon as we know. Elise, how many videos do we do on the programme? So on the programme itself, you've got the pre-scene analysis, which is 2 recordings. And then on top of that, we've also got E1, F1 and P1, sort of looking at the key areas of those. And then there's also a final recording on there as well, Elise, which goes through sort of my closing points, so the key things to note. That would be for the standard course, but then on top of that there is an elite course which starts this Saturday, and the elite course is live sessions with me over the next few weeks. So we have 2-hour sessions debriefing the mock exams and going through any sort of additional questions that you might have there, Elise. Lovely, thanks guys, all wonderful. Do you know, interesting, Elise, it depends on what programme you do. So in terms of mock exams, on the elite programme, you actually get all of your mock exams marked. And when they're marked, their feedback is very, very detailed, Elise. So rest assured, you'll get a lot of detail in relation to that, Elise. Honestly, it's second to none. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, I work with VIVA and other organisations as well. But at least the feedback is exceptional. Very, very detailed, telling you where the areas are that you need to review. So very, very detailed. Oh, I'm glad you found the session informative there. Thank you, Dimakatso. Letitia, I just want to know if you would be exam ready for the OCS sitting in February. You was exempt from P1, F1 and E1 OTs and only have the OCS to write. Letitia, if you use my guidance as a basis, you know, the key areas that I just went through before, P1, E1 and F1, if you just went through those and had a look at whether you feel that you are comfortable with that content, that would be what I call a starter for 10. So if you can go through those and you can check those off and say, look, I feel quite comfortable with those, I wouldn't see, Letitia, why there would be any reason why you couldn't sit the exam in February. What I would do is I would make sure that you go through and have a look at each of the different syllabi and use that as a bit of a checklist and go through that checklist and look at the areas that you might be a little bit rusty on. As I said, you will have the knowledge because you've only got the exemption because you've got the knowledge from somewhere. So for me, I think the first thing I would do, Letitia, is I would go through and just go through each of the syllabi and put a tick next to whether you feel that you have got the knowledge. Now, the other thing I would just say as well, this exam is about application, because essentially what you're doing is you're putting on a hat and you are becoming that individual that works for the organisation. So it's not going to be, for example, about completing lots of variance analysis. This is an interesting point, actually, and sorry, I'm sort of generalising here, but with the operational case study exam, believe it or not, you'll do very, very few calculations at all. Very few. So, for example, when you're asked to look at variances, the variances will have been calculated for you. And what you'll then have to do is you'll have to interpret them. So if you've got some ratio analysis to deal with, the ratios will have been calculated and you will have to interpret them. You know, if you've got a payoff table looking at risk and uncertainty, the payoff table will be provided for you. You're going to have to just tell the user what is required or what that information tells you. A decision tree, the decision tree will be produced. You will then just have to explain what that decision tree shows. So that's where it's very, very different. And as I said, it goes back to what I was saying before about know, learn and churn. It's application. So yeah, we talked about variances. The variances will be done for you. The answer as to why the variances have come to fruition will be included in the question. You just need to pull it out. So Letitia, I would just say, that was a very long answer to a very short question, but I would just say, go through the syllabi, use that as your tick list and just see whether you feel you've got, if you've got too many gaps. And if that's the case, you might want to then wait until May to actually sit it. But I would just do that as a starter, Letitia, is what I would say. Okay, hopefully that answers your question there. No, that's absolutely not a problem at all. Any other questions there? Has anybody got any questions about the actual exam itself and the structure of the exam or what you can anticipate in the exam? Because I do appreciate that you might not necessarily have seen an operational case study exam at this particular point. No more questions there. So yeah, just pop them in the chat panel, pop them in the Q&A panel. Either of those is absolutely fine there. Okay. Now, I'm sure that that's quite a lot to take in from this evening's session. I do hope that I'll get the opportunity to work with these. Sorry, so how many mock exams do you advise you sit? That's a really good question, actually. Well, for VIVA, we've got 3. Yeah, so we've got 3 mock exams that we would expect you to sit. That said, however, you can do a lot of past papers as well. So I would say at least 3 and then review the answers of those, but also past papers are really valuable as well. Yeah, so past papers, but the VIVA mocks are great. They're really good. They're actually written in the same way as the actual exam is written. So we use the same sort of differentiators and descriptors in there as well. So you'll see a lot of similarities between the way that the exams are structured and pulled together for the mock exams there. So yeah, so at the very, very least, I would say the 3 that we provide. But as I said, other past papers are absolutely fantastic as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for your question. Any other questions there? Now, as I said, I do appreciate it can be a little bit overwhelming, not a problem. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first because it's a little bit different. What I would say from this point is if you haven't done already, do make sure that you go and download the pre-seen information from the CIMA website. Make sure that you've got access to that. And then you do need to do a line-by-line analysis in that respect. Sorry, Michelle, so are the paid for marked mocks the same as the answered mocks on VIVA. And we use the mock exams, yeah, Michelle. So the mock exams are the mock exams. The difference is with the elite course is that you actually get individual feedback on those. So yes, you've got access to model answers, but the individual feedback will go through on a line by line basis your mock exam and give you feedback in terms of, you know, how you might structure it better, how you might be able to get some additional marks in there, the areas that you missed as well. And that's the difference to the sort of all access course, because with the all access course, you obviously don't get your mocks marked, whereas with the elite course, you do, Michelle. And so we go through that on a line by line basis and give you specific feedback for your responses. It's the most detailed feedback that I've ever seen, if I'm absolutely honest with you, Michelle. But no, they're the same mocks. It's just different in terms of the feedback that you get there, Michelle. Okay. So get that pre-seen, not a problem, Michelle. Get that pre-seen, get access to that pre-seen. And as I've said, sorry, Teresa. Please don't be scared, Teresa. I'm glad you enjoyed the session, but don't be scared. Honestly, by the end of going into the exam, believe me when I say this, and you probably won't believe me this evening, Teresa, but students do say that they end up preferring these types of exams, because if you think about it, with an objective test question, Teresa, it's right or wrong, isn't it? Whereas with this, you've got the opportunity to explain. You can explain what you mean. You can think about the application in there as well. So honestly, and I'm not lying, a lot of students tell me that they prefer the case study exams to the objective test ones. So, you know, leave that with you as a little bit sort of a snippet, a little bit of food for thought in relation to that. Thanks, Teresa. Okay, right then, guys. So as I said, if that's all your questions, I'm sure you'll have more. You will have an email which is sent to you with everything that we've covered this evening, with a lot more information on there as well. And you will have the email address, which is info@vivatuition.com, if you've got any sort of additional specific questions in there, and the guys will be on hand to help with that. I look forward to working with some of you over the next few weeks if you are joining the workshops and the elite course with myself, and I will be on the forums that you guys have access to as well. So I will be on there. I tend to sort of give you lots of things to have a look at, lots of additional areas to review as well. Petra, so do I have experience with overseas students? Absolutely, yeah. I've been teaching now for Petra, gosh, it's nearly 23 years. That makes me feel old. And in that time, Petra, I've worked with UK students and also overseas students. We always have a mixture of UK-based and overseas students on our courses as well, Petra. Okay. So if you sign up for the course, sorry, Teresa, if you sign up for the course, do you get the mock exams up front? No, they are all available to you. Yeah, they're all available to you up front. So rest assured you have access to those. Erin, the feedback is quick. Yeah, so once it's been submitted, you would normally get feedback within 3 days in that respect. So rest assured, Erin, nice quick turnaround in that sense. Sorry, Elise, so is it teaching, is it on a one-to-one basis? No, we've got a little cohort. Yeah, so a small group of learners that are on the workshops, but the workshops themselves, Elise, are a little bit less informal than what we've gone through tonight. So basically it is through Zoom and we go through workshops, but because it's a nice small group, like this evening, we had quite a lot of students on this evening, but it is, you do have the ability to unmute yourself and ask me questions. And so it's more of a discussion, a workshop, as opposed to it just being on the chat panel. So that's where it gets a little bit different, but I tailor my teaching to you, Elise. So if, for example, there is a particular area that you guys are struggling with on the workshops, then I'll make sure that I cover questions based on that. So I always, the way I approach it is I say that the elite course is your course and I will do whatever you want me to do on that elite course. I'll debrief all the mock exams, but I'll also cover any sort of key areas as well. Erin, what time are the courses? The elite courses, and this is UK time. The majority of them are on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. till 12 on that day, so just 2 hours each. And if I remember rightly, this time round there's one evening session, just because of the it's quite short between now and actually the exam. So I think there's one evening workshop as well, which I believe will start at 6 p.m. Elise, what is the best way to retain information from the syllabus? Application. That's it, Elise. Yeah. So it's that question practice. The way I talk about it is muscle memory. So the more questions you do of a similar nature, the more it's going to stick. And that's something that we absolutely recommend. There's no point just reading stuff, Elise. No point at all. For me, it's about getting a question, having a go at that question and making mistakes, because you'll remember what those mistakes are, Elise. And then once you come to the actual real exam, you'll know not to do it again. And that's it for me. It's not just about trying to cram as much as you can. It's about application. And that's the biggie for me, Elise. As I say, muscle memory. Okay, muscle memory, and it will start sticking. Okay, brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for all of your questions in there. Petra, cool, you're on the elite course, but you can only see a live webinar on the 24th of the 1st. The first workshop is actually this Saturday, so I'm sure, Petra, that will be updated for you in due course. So rest assured, Petra, that will start showing as and when those are set up and you're added to them. So Petra, again, if you've got any questions, no bother. If you've got any questions, info@vivatuition.com, and they'll be able to look into that for you. And I'll also be on the forums as well. So rest assured, I'll be picking those up, Petra. Okay. Lovely, thanks, Petra. Right, it has been an absolute pleasure this evening. A nice way to spend my Wednesday evening. I look forward to working with you over the next few weeks for some of you guys. And for those of you that don't have the pleasure of working with on this programme, hopefully I'll get the chance in the future. And otherwise, just want to wish you all the best, really, in terms of this exam. It is different, but you'll learn to love it. I can absolutely assure you of that. So yeah, thank you guys for your input. It's been an absolute pleasure, and look forward to working with you, or otherwise good luck, and I hope it goes really, really well. Thanks everybody, and take care and enjoy the rest of your day.